Vital Hoops, Vital Hoops, Vital Hoops is for the culture.
Peace, everybody. Welcome to the VITAL HOOPS Podcast. My name is Fernando Cardenas, aka International XB. I am your host. This is episode 33, and today we will be discussing Cuba and Africans on the island, or Afro Cubans. Okay, now this is a deep topic. I'm not gonna go too long over here. I have reached out to a couple of people that I want to have on the show. Hopefully it will happen soon. But as of today, we're going to talk a little bit about the situation in Cuba. So let's do it. First and foremost, for those who don't know, I am Afro-Cuban and French. I was born here in France, around the Paris area. And I grew up in Cuba. I left with my family when I was 7 years old in the early 90s. Okay, so I do understand and recognize that I have somewhat of a privilege, you know what I mean, in comparison to my peers, to my Afro-Cuban peers, my family, you know what I mean, that's over there, that's been living there their whole lives, most of my family, and even my cousin, who is like my brother, who we basically were raised together, like as we were raised as brothers, as best friends, and he's my cousin, and you know, obviously we live a different life. But this episode is not about me per se. If you want a little bit more information about me, you could go to VitalHoops.net, and there's a small bio there of myself, and you can check that out, VitalHoops.net. But anyway, it is also important to note that I am a Pan-Africanist. Definitely anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, anti-capitalism. Okay, I do not describe myself as a communist or a socialist, even though I do understand that socialism can and has been used in the favor of our people. And yeah, so that's about it. I just wanted to put that up front so people understand kind of where I'm coming from. Okay, as I said, I grew up in Cuba, and I got into activism, you know, through hip hop culture. Through hip hop, I got into activism. I have to say that, you know, in Cuba, being a hip hopper is like being an outcast in some sort. You know what I'm saying? Today it has changed a little bit because the black radical aspect of hip hop is going away from the artists, unfortunately. But, you know, in the early 90s and the 2000s, and, you know, when I started, Cuban hip hop was black, and it was about black pride and being African, and, you know, so it was not popular culture in Cuba, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, everything, the way we're living, our culture was very different from the average Cuban, you know what I mean? So that's important to understand. We hip hop artists in Cuba, especially from the old school, we have a different vision, a different way of doing things in many ways. Because we did, a lot of us, not everyone obviously, but a lot of us did get that black consciousness through hip hop. You know what I mean? I just wanted to note that as well. Okay, so things in Cuba have always been extremely difficult, specifically for us Afro-Cubans. Okay, we ended slavery in 1886, which means we were the second to last country to end slavery. The last one was Brazil. And, you know, it shows not only, you know, in the way that society works, but I think it's not just a Cuba thing. It's very much so Spanish colonies. You know, the Spanish, I guess, had some type of in certain aspects, in other aspects, is very similar to the French colonizer and the English colonizer, but they had certain specific things that they did that made it that, for example, we have a lot less Pan-Africanist material and pro-black material, historic material written in Spanish than in English or in French. You know what I mean? Even though we do have lots of, you know, rebellions and organizing and all of that within the Spanish-speaking African diaspora. So anyway, yeah, like as I said, Cuba, it has always been difficult for us. And today is no different. Now, I'm not here to go through the entire history of Cuba, but, you know, I lived there. I lived there for many years. You know, the reality is that today is extremely difficult for our people, Afro Cubans. And, you know, there is oppression from the Cuban state to our people directly. I'm saying this because one of my main reasons for this episode is not only to share my information and my experience as far as Cuba, but also to have solidarity from independent organizations. You know what I'm saying? People who call themselves revolutionaries, organizers, and others, you know, basically other Africans from the diaspora, to be in solidarity with, you know, us Afro Cubans, my brothers and sisters, my family on the island, right? And that doesn't mean being in solidarity with the Cuban government, which is a misconception. The Cuban government today is not for the people. And many times we get that misconstrued because of Cuba's resistance against the United States. But the way they are treating Africans on the island is not coherent. I want to make that clear. I know this because I lived it. As I said, it has always been difficult. When I got to Cuba, it was the early 90s, and it was what they called the special period, right? Which means, you know, everything was extremely difficult. We know about the United States embargo, which is one of the main problems. But it is something that the Cuban government likes to always use as an excuse, right? And they do use it as an excuse because there are many things that happen on the island that are not linked to the embargo, such as taking people to prisons simply for, you know, having a point of view, for raising their voice, you know, for voicing an opinion, you know, for protesting, for making artwork that doesn't go along with the system. Okay. So anyway, let me go back. As I was saying, during the special period, it was already very difficult. Things went up and down from there, you know, and as I said, you know, I've been very, very privileged. I've had the opportunity of living in different countries, but recently I was living back in Cuba with my family, and you know, the pandemic hit, and a little bit before then, things were getting a little worse in Cuba. Things were getting very complicated, and then the pandemic hit, and things went crazy, crazy, crazy. There was a certain amount of people protesting. You know, I was present in one of those protests, and you know, we had to leave Cuba, you know, for the better of for my children. It was just the right thing to do, and so this is why my wife and my children, we came here to France. And the situation in Cuba today is extremely difficult for our brothers and sisters to eat. Just to eat is very difficult. For everything is complicated. There's literally nothing. There's nothing in the hospitals. I know people like to reference the medicine, the hospitals when it comes to Cuba, but the reality is, yes, the doctors are great, but there's no materials. There's nothing to, you know, if you have to go to the dentist, there's no anesthesia. You know, there's nothing. There's nothing. It's very, very, very difficult right now to live in Cuba as a Cuban. I'm not saying, you know, people go on vacation. I mean, it looks great, but the reality is other. So once again, you know, all the regular things we know that, you know, I mean, some may not know, but, you know, it is a reality that in Cuba, you know, the government is mainly white. You know, they send out their token leaders to go receive African presidents. And, you know, when black people come in, they send out their token black leaders, but mainly the government is white, you know, made up of, you know, descendants of the conquistadors. And it has always been that way. One of the main areas in which money comes in Cuba is tourism. In tourism, there's a little bit more money than in other things. So people try to work in tourism, whatever, you know, taxis, hotels, whatever they can do, because they know they're going to be able to make a little bit more money. So the managers of restaurants or, you know, hotels and things like that are most usually white or lighter skin. And, you know, they're people in better positions that can earn a better living. They're usually white. This is a reality to this day. It is important for me to mention that I do support the 1959 revolution. Before then, you know, the other president was just a puppet of the United States, Batista. And I do support the revolutionary act of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara coming into Cuba, but I just don't think it aged well. You know, as time went on, the government really chose to maintain and to form a dictatorship. Today, you really have to call it that, because it is what it is. The majority of the people don't want this government in place, and they have become very oppressive to people. You know, as I said, it is not possible to raise your voice and protest and say you're not okay with something. You know, anytime you raise your voice, they accuse you of being part of the United States and being part of the imperialist plan and all of this, even though we do know it is true that the United States invests money in certain programs in Cuba in order to have people go against the system. We know this. This is a reality. But a lot of people do it because it is a reality for them that, you know, they're not living good. They're struggling too much. They're working hard, and it's difficult for them to even eat. So they're tired. They want something new. They want the current government to leave. And where I disagree with a lot of my brothers and sisters in Cuba, but obviously me being outside now, it's easier for me to say so. But obviously I don't want the United States coming in or any other country coming in. You know, I believe there needs to be a change, but a lot of them on the island are today saying by any means necessary, fuck it, we just need to end this dictatorship. You know, and what I'm saying is that, you know, we need a movement to grow from within. We do need a completely different government. We need these motherfuckers to leave, but we need a new system to grow from within, from Cuba, you know, and in my opinion, obviously this needs to be a movement that has a Pan-Africanist view, or something like the Independent Party of Color, the Partido Independiente de Color. This is the first Black political party in the Western Hemisphere, which was founded in 1908 in Havana, the PIC, Partido Independiente de Color, and they were massacred by Cuba and the United States in 1912. This was a party that was starting to gain popularity. You know, they were advocating for racial pride, for equality, for justice. They basically wanted Black folk to be able to have power, to grow, and to be really what they were advocating was equality at the time, really. And obviously the white power structure shut that down in 1912, and thousands of Afro Cubans were murdered. Jose Miguel Gomez was the president at the time, and to this day there's a statue of this man in Havana, in Vedado, a huge statue of Jose Miguel Gomez, who was the president who basically ordered, alongside the United States, I think President Roosevelt was involved in that at the time, the massacre of the independence of colors, you know, the PIC who rose up for our rights. And I believe something like the PIC needs to be reborn today within the island. Now, the PIC's history is fascinating. I do have a historian that's going to be here on the Vital Hoops podcast soon, hopefully. This will be we're going to dedicate an episode to that. So make sure you stay connected. Make sure you subscribe to our channels and be ready for this. But yeah, like I said, the change, in my opinion, has to come from within. If it doesn't, then we're going to get colonized. We're going to go right back to what we have been, to how it has been in the past, to how Cuba has always been. And our people are going to be at the bottom again. So this is very important, in my opinion. So as I said, I do support the early Cuban revolution, but we need to also understand that this wasn't an African revolution, right? This means that at the beginning, yes, our people benefited from it, as all Cubans did, right? A lot of our people got houses, which was great, which was necessary, because a lot of our people did not have houses. Unfortunately, today they can't even maintain these houses, and these houses are falling on our people's heads in many cases. But also, there were negative sides to it as well, meaning that, for example, Fidel Castro did not want any religion at all. What does this mean? It means that, for example, religion, I know you're thinking the oppressor's religion, but there is the religion that our ancestors brought to us, which is, you know, what we call Santeria. There are many traditions within that, but many African traditions within that. Now, my problem with Santeria is that it has been mixed with Catholicism. You know what I'm saying? And I believe it needs to be, you know, not mixed. But that's a whole different conversation and an episode for another day. But there are many things that we have learned through it. many ancestral knowledge that we have learned through these African religions that came with our ancestors that were completely prohibited, as well as music and other cultural things. So this means that they considered, for example, jazz or any music made by Africans in the United States, they considered that to be imperialist music. So our people couldn't consume that kind of music. Okay. But these are our brothers and sisters making music. You understand what I'm saying? From different parts of the world. And same thing with reggae. Reggae has always been frowned upon in Cuba, always. So this is another negative aspect, from that. But there are other things. For example, this is something that I lived at first when I in the early 90s, our people, Cuban people, couldn't get into hotels, for example, right? We weren't allowed into hotels. Hotels were only for tourists. So how does racism come into this? Most of the tourists, it might still be today, but definitely in the early 90s, most of the tourists were white people. So when a brother would go into a hotel right away, security, police would be all up on him, right? Certain white Cubans could kind of make it work. They could kind of pass for it. They would, sneak in. They would do their thing. But us, as soon as we walked up to the door, police, security, boom, 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 boom. Okay. And, still to this day, when we talk to tourists in the street, or when Afro Cubans have, a boyfriend or girlfriend that is a tourist, police comes over to harass us. This is still real things that happen up to this day. And I've lived it all. You know what I'm saying? As an Afro Cuban, even though I am light skinned, I am mixed. I've lived it all. Meaning that, for example, being stopped by the police for nothing, for being black, things that don't happen to white Cubans at all. This doesn't happen to white Cubans. It happens to us. For example, my cousin at one point used to get stopped every day on the way to work. Every day, same cop, one or two cops that would catch him every day on the way to work just to ask him for ID. This is things that Afro-Cuban go through. You know what I mean? As hip hop artists, we had our albums taken away at customs, and they told us that they didn't like the cover artwork because why was there a black fist on the cover? And so they held on to our albums and they didn't want to give them back. When private bars started opening up in Cuba, the racism, just not being let into bars, just like, this wasn't even off the state, this just people being like, nah, we're full tonight. Then you move over to the side, you see white people come in, they let them right in. You know what I'm saying? These are real things that happen. Being at protests and having undercover cops, chase you to fuck you up. People acting like they're the people, you know what I'm saying? And they're undercover cops chasing you and looking to beat people up. And, worse than that, having state security at my house because of organizing, because of being with organizations that, anti-racist organization, and just getting together. We're not allowed to get together. When they see more than 10, 15 black people together, that's always a problem, right? So having state security at my house, threatening me, telling me that, I have a nice family. Why do I do this? I don't need to do this. Staying in front of my house, eyeing everybody that comes into my house, asking them for ID. All this is a reality that we Afro-Cubans live. And some of my people have lived it even worse. They've been taken to jail for the night just because they know that there's an event coming and they might raise their voice. So they put them in jail for the night. You know what I mean? And to this day, some of my peers, rappers are in jail. They have become political prisoners. Not because they were organizing to overthrow the system. They didn't have AK-47s, nothing. They were just speaking up, saying they're against the current government, and they're now in jail, in prison. So this is what I'm talking about when I say, the government oppresses its own people. With that being said, I'm definitely against the embargo, and it definitely has to be lifted. And then, culturally, Cuba has always been pushing the Cuban national agenda, right? They want us to be nationalists. They love to say that there is no racism in Cuba and there is no color. We are all the same. And it is absolutely false. As I said before, you could see it within better jobs, quote unquote better opportunities, people who make more money, who are managers in nice places, white, very light skin, right? People doing the difficult jobs, people, struggling, the poorest neighborhoods, black, darker. This is a reality. And I 100% know it's not just a Cuba thing. Obviously, this happens all over Latin America, all over South America, the Caribbean, everywhere, right? But it's a reality that we live as well in Cuba that a lot of people think it's not like that in Cuba. It absolutely is. And so this thing of, saying that we are all Cubans, and obviously the racism that exists, a lot of Cubans have gone away from their blackness, from their Africanness, right? Even though many of them still practice their African religion, right? Even though many of them today are into music, African drums or whatever. But, it stops at, we're not going to call ourselves Africans. We're not going to be in solidarity with Africans throughout the world. One of the major problems I think we have is this Latino thing. You understand what I'm saying? So when we see a Haitian brother, he's not our brother. A Venezuelan white guy or an Argentinian white guy is going to be our brother, right? Because of this Latino thing, which is completely forced. We're Africans, we're Afro Cubans, right? We're Afro descendants, just like the Jamaicans, just like the Haitians, just like the brothers from the United States, just like the Afro Colombians and the Afro Venezuelans, right? But we're gonna, because of the language and sometimes the religion barrier, we're gonna see the guy who speaks the same language as us as our brother, and this is something that has hurt us, I believe, something that has hurt us. But, hip hop brought some of that back, because hip hop was always, and hip hop is one of the main things that guided me through Black consciousness and then Pan-Africanism. And what got me to hip hop was basketball. But, that's another story. But so, being within the hip hop movement in Cuba in the early 90s and early 2000s, it was all about Blackness, being proud to be Black, being an African, speaking against police brutality, internationalism, hip hop revolution. This was what it was about. You know what I'm saying? And today we have lost the Black radical element in hip hop, and it has hurt us also, I believe. And so, yeah, the Cuban government, for many years it has supported, I understand it has supported Africans on the continent. It has supported Africans around the world as well, sent doctors many places. But as I'm trying to articulate, it hasn't been the same for us Africans in the island, for Afro Cubans. They have never supported. As a matter of fact, the Black Panthers Party wanted to create and start a chapter in Cuba, and the government was not having it. They were not having it. They didn't want that pride on the island. They have never wanted us Afro Cubans to identify even as Afro descendants or Afro Cubans or Africans, even less. So as I wrap things up, I just want to leave 2 points out there. Okay, 2 points. The first one is for my Afro Cubans, that do speak English and that understand this. Stop thinking that the right wing is with us. Stop taking pictures with right-wing politicians when you leave Cuba. Stop using right-wing quotes. Stop taking pictures with police officers in the United States and in other places. Stop all that bullshit. Stop it. The right wing is not for us. It is not for our people. They want to take Cuba over and make that shit the Las Vegas that it was before, or some shit like that. They want more power and they want to use it for their own good. Same thing with white Cubans from Miami. They're not looking to empower us, to empower the people, to have the people who are at the bottom do better. They're not looking for that. They're looking for themselves. Stop looking for support on the right. Okay, the extreme right, it is what it is. It has always been fascist, racist, homophobic, xenophobic. You know what I mean? They're not looking to uplift our people. Okay. Second thing I want to say, please, to our people, Pan-Africanists around the world, check us out. If you go to Cuba, please go to organizations that are not part of the state. Try to go by yourself. And I can definitely point you to some people. Definitely reach out if you have any questions and you want to continue this conversation, or if you want to link up with people who are doing the work in Cuba. You know what I mean? But please stop going through government institutions. They're always going to pull government interests. And obviously they're going to hide all this that I'm talking about now. This is what governments do. You wouldn't go to a capitalist country and go check out the organizations that are tied to the government, right? So please do the same in Cuba, even though it is so-called socialist. What's happening in Cuba today is far from socialism. They use all the right words, they have all the right rhetoric, but it's not reality. They're oppressing the people. So please look for the people doing the work on the ground that are not tied to the government. Look for those organizations. They're out there. There isn't many. The government doesn't allow this to happen. We're not allowed to start organizations that are not tied to anything independent is against the law, basically. But it still happens, obviously, and our people are out there fighting, really, people that are truly for the people. They're out there, and they will tell you that, it's difficult out there and the government is not with the people. So please check that out. I would love, I'm open. Please reach out. The Vital Hoops podcast, we are going to keep, elaborating on this always, because this is an important topic. So that's that, VitalHoopsPodcast@gmail.com. Hit me up if you have any comments, if you want me to touch on any specific points that I hit, because as I said, I didn't really elaborate too much, but it was important for me to talk about this a little bit, as there's a lot going on these days, globally with our people. And speaking of globally, I want to say respect and resistance to our people in Senegal, who are going through very tough moments. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Make sure you check out what's going on in Senegal. It is serious. So free Senegal and free our people worldwide. Okay, so one last thing I did want to say real quick. I'm saying, obviously, free Asada. Much respect to Asada, and also to Nahanda Biodun, who is the godmother of Cuban hip hop. You understand what I'm saying? Her and Asada used to be very present in Havana in all types of hip hop organizations, parties, everything. I ran across them, especially Asada, I think a couple of times when I was very young, but some of my peers in the hip hop community in Cuba definitely got the chance to build with them, and they were amazing. And they helped bring Nahanda and Asada helped bring that African pride to our people, So this is why I'm telling you, in the hip hop community, we always kind of had that. But yeah, definitely. R.I.P. to Nahanda, rest in power, and much respect to Asada. We haven't heard from Asada in a very long time, obviously, since things have gotten worse, and now they have raised, the money on her head. But I hope she's doing very well, and yeah, that's that. Much respect. I'm not going to talk about the NBA finals today. I will be doing that next episode. But since we're talking about Cuba, I did want to, mention a couple of things that's going on over there. First of all, shout out and much respect to all the people doing the work over there in Cuba, and to all my hip hop peers, and all my ball players as well. I'm saying, my street ball squad out there. Couple of days ago was the 15th anniversary of Full Court Peace in Cuba. So much respect to Full Court Peace. They've been working in Cuba for many years, 15 years, and it was the anniversary a couple of days ago. They organized, they help, fix courts over there in Havana, and they also bring shoes for people to hoop. They bring basketballs, and they had a little event going on, and it was like a hip hop concert and street ball event. It was really dope. Some of my homies over there, hip hop artists were out there, and ball players. So much respect to Full Court Peace. I did want to mention that. And also shout out to Capitalino, which is the Havana team. They won the championship, in the Cuban basketball championship. So shout out to Capitalino. Growing up, I used to be out there, go to the games with my boys. It was a good time, being a young boy. Cuba has always had very good athletes, and in basketball has been no different. So shout out to all the hoopers, all the hip hoppers, and all my organizers in Cuba. And shout out to my family. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to my family. AB, what up? All my family, 340 MS, Guerrilla Republic, Cuba. Yeah, if you look behind me real quick, you can see a Up there is obviously one of our great Pan-Africanist leaders, Amilcar Cabral. But right below him is a brother, Duncan, the basketball, with a Cuba jersey on. That's Lázaro Borrell. You know, he's one of the greatest Cuban ball players ever. He was the second and last Cuban to make the NBA. The first one was Andrés Guibert. So yeah, like I said, shout out to all my people. So for my book recommendation, this episode I want to recommend Contra el Silencio from Quince Duncan. Contra el Silencio, los afrodescendientes y el racismo en el Caribe continental hispano. Means against silence, Afro-descendants and racism in the continental Hispanic Caribbean. This is a very interesting book and very good from Quince Duncan. Quince Duncan is a brother from Costa Rica. He's a writer, great writer. I actually had the opportunity of speaking with him on a panel, on a Pan-Africanist panel not too long ago. And it was great. So much respect to Quince Duncan. I'm not sure this book is available in English, but for all my Spanish-speaking people, you know, Contra el Silencio. This is the Cuba edition. I actually bought this one in Cuba. But yeah, great book. All right, this is it. Like I said, don't hesitate to hit me up and let me know what you want. You know, what you want Vital Hoops to cover next. It was important for me to let this out today on my platform. Listen, we're on social media. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you know, and definitely like, share, subscribe, please. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you like. And hit us up, as I said, VitalHoopsPodcast@gmail.com. Check out the website, VitalHoops.net. And please share this. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. And Vital Hoops is for the culture. Peace.